Ever feel like you're caught between like two worlds, like where modern life kind of clashes with all the traditions you grew up with?
Oh, yeah.
That's the world we're diving into today.
Okay.
We're going to explore this true story of Bridget Cleary, a woman in 1895, rural Ireland,
Wow.
whose life ended tragically at the intersection of folklore, fear,
Right.
and changing times.
Okay.
Really fascinating story.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
one that, it's a
Yeah.
story that resonates even now, a century later.
Yeah.
And for this deep dive,
Mhm.
we're using a recounting of Bridget's story
Okay.
from the popular true crime podcast, Morbid.
Oh, interesting.
It's a case that gripped both sides of the Atlantic.
Oh, wow.
Not just for the shocking events themselves,
Right.
but for what it reveals about human nature and the power of belief.
Really makes you think, huh?
It does.
So let's start by introducing you to Bridget Boland.
Okay.
She was a successful seamstress and egg merchant
Wow. Okay.
in a small village called Ballyvodlea. In County Tipperary, a place deeply rooted in tradition, even in that setting, Bridget stood out.
That's interesting. So she was kind of a woman ahead of her time then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Financially independent,
Oh, wow.
known for her stylish clothes,
Mm-hmm.
and seemingly unfazed by the societal expectations placed on women in her community.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So she was married, right?
She was married to Michael Cleary,
Okay.
a cooper, but their relationship was anything but conventional.
Oh, okay. How so?
There were rumors of infidelity on both sides,
Oh, wow.
and they even lived apart for the first few years of their marriage.
It's kind of a
Yeah,
strange relationship.
yeah, very unconventional.
It's important to note that Michael had no family nearby.
Oh, okay.
While Bridget was surrounded by a large and close-knit clan,
Huh.
this difference in social support likely played a role in the dynamics of their relationship
Yeah.
and the events that unfold.
It's interesting how these kind of things can impact, people's actions,
Yeah.
and decisions, and things like that.
So definitely.
So now imagine this. It's March of 1895,
Okay.
and Bridget falls ill after visiting her relative, Jack Dunn.
Okay.
Now, we're not talking about a simple cold here.
Right.
She experiences chills, headaches,
Uh-huh.
becomes bedridden.
Oh, wow.
This is a serious illness.
Yeah.
And remember, this is rural Ireland in the late 1800s.
Oh, right.
Access to health care was limited,
Mm-hmm.
and accurate diagnoses were even harder to come by.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So this is where Jack Dunn,
Okay.
relative Bridget visited,
Right.
becomes a key figure in the story.
Okay.
He lived near a place called a fairy court,
What's that?
an ancient ring-shaped earthwork steeped in Irish folklore.
Interesting.
Jack was known as a shanachi,
A what?
a traditional storyteller,
Oh, okay.
well-versed in local lore,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it came to fairies.
So these storytellers, they held a certain authority in the community.
They did.
Okay.
Their words carrying weight
Right.
and influencing people's perceptions.
Interesting.
Okay.
So we've got a sick woman,
Yeah.
a superstitious relative who lives near a place associated with fairies.
Uh-huh.
You can probably see where this is going.
Oh, yeah.
Jack Dunn becomes convinced that
Mhm.
Bridget's illness is not what it seems.
Okay.
He believes she's been replaced by a changeling.
A changeling.
Yeah,
For those of us not up on our Irish folklore,
Right.
can you explain what that is?
of course. So in Irish folklore, a changeling is a creature,
Okay.
often a sickly or deformed child,
Mm-hmm.
that fairies would leave behind
Okay.
after stealing a human baby,
Oh, thou.
or in some cases, even an adult.
Really?
It was a way to explain sudden changes in behavior, appearance,
And it-
or health.
So Jack Dunn is looking at Bridget's illness,
Yeah.
her prosperity,
Mhm.
her childlessness,
Mhm.
and he's fitting it all into this pre-existing belief in changelings.
Precisely.
Wow.
And this is where the story takes a dark turn.
Okay.
Jack Dunn's belief, fueled by superstition,
Right.
and perhaps his own anxieties,
Mhm.
starts to influence others in the community.
Oh, no.
So now we have a community grappling with Bridget's illness.
Okay.
Some are concerned for her physical well-being,
Mm-hmm.
while others, swayed by Jack Dunn's pronouncements,
Right.
begin to believe she's been replaced by a fairy imposter.
Wow. Okay.
This sets the stage for a clash
Yeah.
between traditional beliefs
Yeah.
and a more modern, rational worldview.
Really interesting.
And this clash is further complicated by the limited access to health care
Oh, right.
in rural Ireland at the time.
Okay.
A doctor,
Mhm.
Dr. Green, is
Doctor.
called in to examine Bridget.
Okay.
He diagnoses her with nervous excitement and slight bronchitis
Wow.
and prescribes medication.
Okay.
However, due to the constraints of his practice, which focused on providing care for the poor, he's unable to monitor her condition closely.
It makes you wonder if things might have turned out differently.
Yeah.
Had Dr. Green been able to provide more consistent care and perhaps challenge the growing influence of superstitions surrounding Bridget's illness.
It's a question that haunts this case.
For sure.
Adding another layer of complexity,
Okay.
a priest, Father Ryan,
Okay.
also visits Bridget.
Okay.
However, bound by his vows of celibacy,
Oh, right.
he spends very little time with her, administering last rites as a precaution
Oh, wow.
rather than out of any real belief that she's near death.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And this seemingly minor detail, Father Ryan's brief visit
Right.
and administration of last rites, is interpreted by Michael Cleary as confirmation of Bridget's dire condition,
Oh, wow.
further feeding into his anxieties
All right.
and making him more susceptible to Jack Dunn's pronouncements about changelings.
That's a chilling example of how even well-intentioned actions can be misinterpreted and twisted
Right.
to fit a narrative that's already taking root in someone's mind, especially when fear and uncertainty are involved.
So now we have Bridget, sick and vulnerable,
Right.
caught in the crosshairs of these clashing perspectives.
Yeah.
A medical diagnosis that's not fully addressed, a religious ritual that's misinterpreted,
Right.
and a growing belief in the community that she's not who she appears to be.
Wow. That's
a bad situation to be in, for sure.
it's a tough spot. Yeah.
And unfortunately for Bridget,
Yeah.
this is just the beginning.
I know.
Her husband, Michael Cleary, begins to actively seek out explanations that confirm his suspicions, choosing to ignore medical advice in favor of folk remedies
Oh, wow.
and the pronouncements of those who believe in fairies and changelings.
This is where the story takes a really dark turn.
Yeah.
And the tragedy starts to unfold.
Michael, guided by Jack Dunn,
Okay.
visits an herb doctor who shares their belief in fairies.
Wow.
He returns with a concoction that he believes will cure Bridget of the changeling.
This marks a significant shift in the narrative. Okay. We see Michael moving from passive acceptance of Jack Dunn's theories to actively seeking out confirmation
Yeah.
and embracing a belief system that justifies increasingly drastic actions.
And these actions, unfortunately for Bridget, are anything but compassionate.
Oh, no. It's really disturbing how these so-called treatments escalate from misguided rituals into outright brutality.
Yeah.
Imagine Bridget, weak and vulnerable, being held down by her husband and others, forced to drink this concoction despite her resistance.
It's hard to even fathom this isn't happening in some far-off ancient time. This is 1895.
Right.
And yet here we have a group of people, including Bridget's own family members, caught up in this delusional frenzy.
It highlights how deeply ingrained these beliefs were in the culture, and how fear and groupthink can override reason and compassion.
That's really scary.
They even burn her forehead with a hot poker, believing it will force the changeling to reveal itself.
You mentioned a detail earlier about spilled milk being a concern.
Right.
How does that fit into all of this?
Yes, that seemingly insignificant detail speaks volumes about the mindset at play.
Okay.
You see, spilling milk was considered a bad omen in Irish folklore. So when some of the hot milk intended for Bridget spilled on the ground, it was seen as further proof that she wasn't truly Bridget.
Oh, wow.
But a malevolent fairy creature.
It's a chilling example of how even everyday occurrences were twisted to fit the narrative they'd constructed around Bridget.
It is.
It's as if they were searching for any shred of evidence to confirm their suspicions, no matter how irrational.
Exactly.
And throughout this ordeal, Bridget maintains her innocence, asserting her true identity, even as those around her try to erase it. At one point, she tells her cousin, "He's making a fairy of me now he thought to burn me about 3 months ago."
That statement reveals so much, doesn't it?
It does.
It suggests that this wasn't an isolated incident.
Right.
There's a history of threats and abuse that have been building up hidden beneath the surface of their marriage.
Exactly. Bridget's words give us a glimpse into the power imbalance and the escalating dangers she was facing.
Yeah.
Not only was her husband isolating her from her family and friends,
Right.
but he was actively trying to control her both physically and psychologically.
It's heartbreaking. Imagine the terror she must have felt.
Yeah.
Lying in bed, surrounded by people who were supposed to love and care for her.
Right.
But instead were treating her like a monster, subjecting her to these agonizing rituals.
And the most tragic part, all of this was happening in front of multiple witnesses.
You're right.
It's just...
Bridget's aunt.
Yeah.
Her cousin Joanna Burke. Even the emergency man she was rumored to be involved with, William Simpson.
Yeah.
They were all present, and yet no one intervened effectively.
It's a sobering reminder of how social pressure and fear can paralyze people.
Oh, yeah.
Preventing them from speaking up or taking action, even when witnessing something clearly wrong.
It's true.
We see this dynamic play out time and again throughout history, even in our own lives.
Right.
Sometimes it's easier to stay silent than to risk the consequences of challenging the group.
And unfortunately for Bridget, the consequences of this collective silence were devastating.
Yeah.
The men, fueled by their delusion and a desire to force a confession from Bridget, escalate their actions. They carry her to the kitchen fireplace and place her on the grate above the flames.
Wait, they actually put her on the fire?
Yes, her own father,
Oh my God.
caught up in this delusional frenzy, repeatedly demands that she declare herself Bridget Boland, wife of Michael Cleary, in the name of God.
It's unimaginable to be betrayed by your own family.
Yes.
To be subjected to such cruelty by the person who vowed to love and protect you.
And even in this moment of unimaginable pain and fear, Bridget manages to utter, "I am the daughter of Pat Boland in the name of God." She clings to her own identity, even as her husband tries to erase it.
It's a powerful act of defiance, a testament to her strength and spirit.
It is.
But it's also deeply tragic because this act of defiance, this assertion of her true self, doesn't stop the horror that's about to unfold.
You're right. After they take her off the fire, Bridget is clearly in agony, writhing in pain and mumbling incoherently.
Oh, no.
But instead of showing remorse or seeking medical help,
Right.
the men seem almost relieved, convinced they've successfully driven out the changeling.
This is where the story takes an even more horrifying turn, isn't it?
It is later that night.
Okay.
Bridget's nightgown catches fire. Witnesses describe a chaotic scene with Michael Cleary behaving erratically. And this is where the question of intent becomes central to the case.
Do you mean whether it was an accident or deliberate?
Exactly. Did Bridget's nightgown accidentally catch fire?
Okay.
Or did Michael deliberately set her ablaze? The accounts are conflicting. Some suggest it was an accident, a tragic outcome of the already horrific situation.
Yeah.
But then we have the testimony of Joanna Burke, Bridget's cousin, who claims that Michael grabbed a nearby lantern and threw lamp oil on Bridget,
Oh my God.
intensifying the flames.
That's chilling. It paints a very different picture, doesn't it?
It does.
It suggests premeditation,
right.
a level of malice that's hard to comprehend.
And his actions while Bridget burned further support this theory.
Okay.
He prevented anyone from helping her, yelling that she's not my wife, but a deceiver sent in place of his real wife. He even claims that they'll soon see her go up the chimney, referencing the belief that a changeling will disappear in a supernatural way.
It's as if he's completely lost in this delusional justification for his actions. The line between reality and the folklore he's embraced has become completely blurred.
And it's important to note that Michael's actions after Bridget's death also raise questions about his true intentions.
Yeah.
He attempts to destroy her remains in the fireplace, further attempting to erase any evidence of his crime.
So what happens next? Does anyone face consequences for what happened to Bridget?
Thankfully, yes, though perhaps not to the extent that one might hope.
Okay.
William Simpson, the emergency man, was horrified by what he witnessed and immediately went to the police.
Good fit.
Joanna Burke also bravely came forward, providing crucial testimony about the events leading up to Bridget's death.
It must have taken immense courage for them to speak up.
It did.
Especially in a community where social pressure to remain silent was likely very strong.
Absolutely. Their actions ultimately led to the arrest of 9 people.
9 people.
Including Michael Cleary,
Wow.
Jack Dunn, several members of Bridget's family,
Oh my gosh.
and even the herb doctor who supplied the so-called cure.
It's staggering to think that so many were involved in this tragedy, either directly or indirectly.
It is.
It speaks to the power of groupthink and the dangers of allowing fear and superstition to override reason and compassion.
It does. And what's even more striking is how the story was then picked up and sensationalized by the press,
Well, right.
both in Ireland and abroad.
Yeah, it became known as the witch burning, didn't it?
It did.
It painted a picture of rural Ireland as like a backward and superstitious place.
It did. The British press, in particular,
Right.
used the story to reinforce negative stereotypes about the Irish, portraying them as savage and ignorant. But as we've discussed, the case was far more nuanced than those simplistic narratives suggested.
Exactly. It wasn't just about superstition gone wrong.
Right.
There were complex social dynamics at play, issues of power,
Yeah.
control, and perhaps even a personal vendetta masked by folklore.
Exactly.
We have the rumors of infidelity,
Right.
Michael's isolation within his marriage, and Bridget's independent spirit that challenged societal norms.
Yeah.
All of these factors created a volatile mix.
Precisely. The belief in fairies and changelings provided a convenient framework for Michael Cleary to justify his actions. But it's crucial to acknowledge the pre-existing tensions and power dynamics that were already present in their relationship and within the community.
It makes you wonder if Michael was truly consumed by the belief in changelings,
Yeah.
or if he was using it as a shield to deflect responsibility for his actions.
That's a question that continues to fascinate historians and folklorists.
For sure.
On the surface, it seems like a clear-cut case of a community gripped by superstition,
Right.
leading to a horrific act of violence. But, as we've seen, there's more to the story. Michael seemed to shift back and forth
Okay.
between embracing the changeling narrative and acknowledging its absurdity.
Wow, so he was kind of...
He vehemently insisted that Jack Dunn's pronouncements had driven him to madness.
Look.
Yet he also engaged in rituals like waiting on Kelowna Hill for Bridget's return.
Okay.
That suggested a genuine belief in the supernatural.
Interesting.
Kelowna Hill, by the way, is a place steeped in folklore,
Oh, wow.
believed to be a gateway to the fairy realm.
So he was trying to have it both ways, using the belief in fairies as a defense,
Right.
while also exploiting it to achieve his own ends.
Yeah, it's a chilling thought.
But what about the trial? What happened to those involved?
The trial took place in July of 1895.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, it was a media sensation.
I bet.
Witnesses provided conflicting and often contradictory accounts of what happened. Some claimed Michael Cleary had been driven to madness by the belief that his wife was a changeling,
Right.
while others suggested a more sinister motive,
Yeah.
pointing to the pre-existing tensions in their marriage and his controlling behavior.
Sounds like there was a lot of finger pointing and attempts to minimize individual responsibility.
There was Michael Cleary, for his part,
Okay.
continued to insist that he'd acted under the influence of Jack Dunn, claiming that he never truly believed Bridget was a changeling, but had been manipulated by Dunn's pronouncements.
But his actions tell a different story, don't they?
They do.
The violence, the attempt to destroy Bridget's remains, the deliberate pouring of lamp oil on her burning body.
Yeah.
It all points to something far darker than mere misguided belief.
You're right. The jury ultimately found Michael Cleary guilty of manslaughter,
Okay.
recognizing that while he was the primary perpetrator, others shared responsibility for the tragic outcome. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
20 years, it hardly seems like justice for taking a life,
Right.
especially under such horrific circumstances.
It's certainly a sentence that would likely be considered inadequate by today's standards.
Right.
But it's important to remember the context of the time. The belief in fairies and changelings, while not universally accepted, was still prevalent in parts of rural Ireland. The judge in the case even expressed hesitation in delivering a murder conviction, reminding the jury that they had the option to recommend a lesser charge of manslaughter, which they ultimately did.
It's a reminder that the legal system, even today, isn't always perfect.
Right.
And it can be influenced by prevailing social beliefs and prejudices. But what about the others involved?
Yeah.
Did they face any consequences for their actions?
Yes, though, to varying degrees.
Okay.
Jack Dunn, the man whose pronouncements about changelings set this tragic chain of events in motion, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for his role in Bridget's death.
3 years. It seems lenient considering the profound impact of his influence.
It does, but it speaks to the complexity of the case.
Right.
And the challenge of assigning blame when dealing with deeply ingrained cultural beliefs. It's also a reminder that legal punishment doesn't always equate to true justice. The consequences for those involved extended far beyond legal penalties.
Yep.
Jack Dunn, upon his release from prison, was ostracized by the community.
Oh, wow.
The Kennedy family, Bridget's relatives who participated in the treatments,
Right.
also faced social repercussions,
Yeah.
with their home being burned down by outraged neighbors.
So while they may have escaped harsher legal penalties,
Yeah.
they still had to live with the weight of their actions and the judgment of their community.
Exactly. And Bridget Cleary's story continues to fascinate and horrify people to this day.
It really does.
It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind faith,
Mhm.
the abuse of power,
Yeah.
and the need to critically examine the stories we tell ourselves about the world.
It reminds us that even in a world that values reason and science,
Yeah.
the allure of folklore and the desire to explain the unexplainable can have real and devastating consequences.
It also highlights the importance of questioning our assumptions,
Right.
challenging harmful beliefs,
Mhm.
and speaking up for those who are vulnerable to exploitation.
Such an important message, and Bridget Cleary's story is a stark reminder that the line between belief and action can be thin,
Oh, yeah.
and the consequences all too real. What
Hmm.
stories do we tell ourselves to make sense of the world? And what happens when those stories turn dangerous? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this case, share your reactions, and any theories you might have with us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe and share this deep dive with others who appreciate a good mystery and a look into history's darker corners. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.